So many thanks for taking the time to attend this masterclass presentation this evening. I very much aim to make it worth your while. So although I have programmed it for a couple of hours, I'll aim to talk for an hour or so and then answer any questions that you may have. So this is being recorded, and the link to the replay will be sent to you along with a PDF checklist of the key neuronutrients that I'm going to talk about tonight as a thank you for attending. And if you have any questions as we go along, if you could put them in the chat, then I will address them at the end. And as outlined in the invite for tonight's presentation, this information is designed to focus on overall neurohealth and enhancing cognitive function. So it will focus specifically on what are considered to be the core neuronutrients, although there are more, and it will include what I describe as the key neuro boosters and superfoods, and we'll also outline the more significant neurohazards before finally giving you a few practical neurowellness tips and tools. So before we go any further, I would just like to point out that the information that you're given here is very high level general information. So your specific situation may require individual assessment and supervision, although I will be discussing simple tips and tools that everyone will be able to implement immediately. So before we go any further, just a little bit about me and why I'm sharing this information. So I've been educating and coaching for over 25 years, but first and foremost, I do what I do for the benefit of my loved ones, as I think most of us do. My family, my friends, and of course myself, to ensure that we're all able to do what we do and what we want to do, what we love to do, for as long as possible for the benefit of all of us. And I believe that one of our greatest responsibilities is our own holistic health and well-being. And yet, generally, we are taught so little about how to care for the incredible body that we live in, let alone the mind and spirit, unless you seek it out for ourselves. And of course, no one is ever going to care more about the health and well-being of yourself and your loved ones than you do. So here am I with mine on Orkney earlier this year at the Standing Stones of Stennis, a place I've wanted to visit for a very long time. And I established my company back in 2018, having witnessed emotional overwhelm, stress, and burnout within every work environment that I had experienced, which included time in the armed forces and in corporate finance. And also having observed increasing neurocognitive challenges and decline with family and friends over the past 20 years. So in addition to professional certifications as a biofeedback hot math consultant and hypnotherapist, initially I provided education, training and coaching for managing stress and increasing resilience and emotional self-regulation and cognitive performance generally. And ultimately that led me to complete a master's in mindfulness and leadership development at Aberdeen University here in Scotland. But especially relevant to this evening's talk, I also have a diploma in holistic nutritional therapy and herbalism, having acknowledged over 15 years ago now the undeniable link between nutrition, health, and especially neurocognitive health, and that this is an essential element of what I call the neuro-wellness protocol that I teach, and hence the focus of this particular presentation tonight. And I would also add that I am an eternal student, and the more I learn, the more I realize I have yet to learn. And people who know me well will testify that I am a bookworm, and my happy place is a library. The older and the more esoteric, the better. And earlier this year, I was very fortunate to be taken by my dear friend Dana in Amsterdam. I was taken to the Rittman Research Institute, also known as the Embassy of the Free Mind, and was given the opportunity to explore some incredible texts. And here I am, closely studying Robert Flood's Construction of the Cosmos. It was a hand-drawn alchemical text from the 16th century. And I'm planning an additional presentation on the significance of alchemy and spagyrics, which is the preparation of medicinal tinctures using ancient alchemical principles. So for those of you who may be interested in a dive down that particular rabbit hole, I will be in touch. So everything that I've learned so far, learned and studied, has evolved into the adaptive and holistic approach that I teach throughout my company Neurolead, and that I summarize as the 5 elements of neurowellness. And these elements are, first of all, emotional neurowellness. So what I mean by that is having greater emotional control and balance, able to self-regulate the autonomic nervous system during times of stress, challenge and change, and resulting overall in increased emotional resilience. Psychological neurowellness, able to live mindfully with self-awareness to recognize, accept, and change our thoughts and emotions in order to adapt behavior, habits, and choices. Physiological neurowellness, so nurturing physiological health with awareness and care, including the environmental and social qualities, physical activity, sleep, and overall physical well-being. And there's a lot of overlap with all of these, as you'll see. Tonight's focus, nutritional neurowellness, so nourishing the brain and body with appropriate nutrition necessary for optimal neurocognitive functioning, including care of the gut-brain relationship, and spiritual neurowellness. And I'm not referring here to a specific religious approach, although it can include that, but more importantly, to be living authentically, acknowledging purpose, meaning, and values with greater existential awareness and development. So my fundamental approach is that any attempt at nurturing long-term neurocognitive health and well-being must incorporate elements that beneficially influence all aspects of neuroconnectedness, not necessarily in the order that I've presented it here, although I would point out that emotional and psychological neurowellness are fundamental elements that do underpin the 5 elements, our ability to not only observe ourselves and to be aware of our habits and behaviours, but more importantly, how to change them. And that will have a knock-on effect with many of the things that we learn here tonight. But mindful of the notion that emotional or psychological well-being can seem hard to quantify or determine, especially at the outset of a neurowellness journey, nutrition is a relatively simple place to start, or at least to make some simple changes that can support you when armed with the right knowledge. And so that's, for the purposes of the presentation today, we will focus primarily on nutritional neurowellness, providing practical takeaways that you can apply immediately. And I should also point out at this stage that my approach to nutrition is to be as natural and bioavailable as possible. That means essentially food source nutrients, and I would also advocate organic wherever possible, unless a therapeutic approach is required and higher dose supplementation is necessary. Otherwise, it just becomes another expensive gravy train for supplement providers. Not that there is anything wrong with high quality, conscious creators of top-notch products, but I do apply the let food be thy medicine and medicine be thy food philosophy in the first instance, rather than resorting to synthetic lab-created products. So before we look at nutritional neurowellness in particular, I just wanted to spend a few moments defining what we mean by the term neurowellness. So it's not just a fancy term for mental health, although I would absolutely expect an increase in neurowellness to beneficially impact mental health generally. But neuro does not just refer to the brain, and it's a common misconception that the term neuro refers to anything brain related, when in fact the term neuro derives from the ancient Greek neura or neuron, meaning sinew or tendon, and more recently nerves or the nervous system. So when we refer to neurowellness, we are not only referring to the wellness of our brain, but also to the wider well-being of our entire nervous system, of which our brain is but a part. Thus, neurowellness can be defined as an understanding and approach that appreciates and nurtures what supports, sustains, enhances, and impedes the collective well-being of our brain and nervous system. And the term cognitive or cognition refers to the fundamental processes governing thought, perception, experience, senses, and action. And although considered to be processed in the brain, the functioning of our entire nervous system feeds that cognitive process. So it is imperative to understand how and why we function holistically as we do before we can begin to alter and beneficially change both its performance and our wider performance as a result. But when we're talking about neurocognitive function, performance and long-term health, what are we actually seeking to preserve? And I think we would agree that it's clear thinking, decision-making ability, clear reasoning, problem solving, maintaining a good working memory, emotional regulation, and appropriate social behavior, all of which are functions of the prefrontal cortex, the frontal lobe. And the Neurolead training on emotional and psychological neurowellness will discuss these elements in much more detail at a future date. So our overall approach to health and performance, and particularly health, is defined as the condition and degree to which the individual is free from illness, but is a holistic and proactive one, not just focused on the physical body, but acknowledging the role played by the mind and the spirit too. And this requires examining all aspects of our individual health and well-being, not just the physical. And all new clients at Neurolead are invited to undertake holistic neurowellness assessment as a fundamental starting point. And so wellness, overall neurowellness, therefore, we very much approach it as a proactive pursuit of activities, choices, and lifestyle that leads to holistic health, and in this case, neurocognitive health, i.e. neurowellness. So I hope that that all makes sense. Okay, so when we discuss the physical brain and the heart and the nervous system, or any other aspect of our physical selves, what do they actually consist of? What are the nutrients that we consume actually nurturing? Well, this first image is a micrograph of a blood vessel, artery, and vein. This is a cross-section of human kidney. And this is a cross-section of a human cerebellum and nerve. So in short, we are nurturing our cells, or more precisely, the mitochondria, or energy-generating organelles that live inside the cells. And mitochondria are essential for cognitive brain health, primarily because they produce the adenosine triphosphate, ATP, the primary energy currency required for neuronal function, synaptic transmission, and neurotransmitter synthesis. So the brain, despite comprising only about 2% of body mass, consumes approximately 20% of the body's energy, and a demand that's met largely through mitochondria-produced energy. And this energy requirement is critical for sustaining cognitive processes such as learning, memory, and executive function. So we tend to think of our organs and indeed ourselves as one mass, the brain, the heart, and even the body itself, when the reality is that these are just names that we've given to the mass of cells that are formed in a particular way and for a particular function, and are in fact dealing with the needs of individual and collective cells of our bodies and organs, estimated around 37 trillion in total. So I like to think of ourselves as a microcosmic version of the macrocosmic world around us. And when we take care of our individual selves, we're better able and equipped to contribute and care for those around us, and our individual cells are no different. So it's important to understand how they function, and perhaps even more importantly, what nutrients are required for that optimal functioning. And one mind analogy that you may be familiar with is that of a garden and the concept of weeding the mind or tending the mind as one would tend a garden, i.e. being consciously aware of how our individual mind functions, how we're thinking, how we're feeling, acting and behavior, and weeding out thoughts that do not serve us and fertilizing that garden and caring for it regularly. But I also consider that if we're bothering to do that and starting to nurture our physical selves and our psychological selves in an attempt to improve and preserve our overall health and well-being, especially our long-term cognitive function, it makes sense, and rather it makes no sense to me, to be engaging in behaviors and nutritional habits which are harmful to neurocognitive health. That's akin to replanting weeds as fast as we've weeded them, or pouring weed killer on our prize roses or Roundup on our vegetable patch, which hopefully we wouldn't do. And yet many people disregard the nutritional aspect of neurowellness. And while some may be aware of a healthy diet, a and some of the neuro-friendly nutrients, there may still be a lack of awareness of some other nutritional behaviors that can harm our overall neurocognitive performance. And so I really do take a truly holistic view of nutrition, the diet of the mind being as important as the diet of the body, if not more so. So I hope that that makes sense. So here are a few neurofacts that you may already know or may be surprised to learn. The brain is actually the fattiest organ in the body. It's nearly 60% fat and 3 pounds in weight. 25% of the oxygen intake goes straight to the brain. And I already mentioned earlier that it uses 20% of the energy intake, but it actually has no storage capacity, which is why it requires a constant supply of fuel. 25% of that energy consumed is then further consumed by brain cell functioning, by the neurons, the nerve cells, and the glial cells. So that's the connective brain tissue that supports and protects the neurons. And a whopping 75% is actually used for the electrical signaling, which is the sending and processing of information. And it's estimated that we have about 100 billion, 85 to 100 billion neurons, depending on which latest research we read, and a further 100 billion glial cells. And glial cells, which I mentioned, are the connective brain tissue, but they regulate neurotransmitter clearance, and they integrate and process the synaptic connections between the synapses and regulate neuronal function. So new synaptic connections can be made throughout life as we learn new things, and lifelong learning is actually essential for cognitive health. It's really important to keep learning as we age, not just for the sake of knowledge itself necessarily, but actually so that we keep rewiring the brain and we keep the grey matter regenerating itself. It literally is a case of use it or lose it. And interestingly, one of the best activities to take up as we age is some form of balance generating movement. So for some people that might be yoga, but actually one of the best ones is ballroom dancing, because not only are you building the new synaptic connections as you learn the new steps and routines, but you also have the proprioceptive feedback of the brain knowing where the body is and what the limbs are doing, and that assists greatly with balance, which balance is one of the key issues with people falling and having accidents as they age. So it's really important that we also maintain our balance. And the brain is always functioning. It never shuts off. Even when you sleep, it slows, but it's still working. So thinking does, in fact, burn calories even when we sleep. And research estimates that we burn approximately 320 calories a day by thinking alone. Maybe you're burning some of those here tonight. So some more neurofacts, that now that we're beginning to appreciate that neurowellness is not just about the brain, but from a physical perspective, it does in fact incorporate the rest of our nervous system. And it's important to understand the role of the other major organ in the nervous system, and in this case, the heart. Now, research by the HeartMath Institute, amongst others, demonstrates that it is the first complete and fully functioning organ in utero. At approximately 6 weeks, it's beating rhythmically about 110 beats per minute, whereas the brain, on the other hand, continues to develop and isn't fully developed until around 20 years after birth. So even into your early 20s, the brain is still developing. So the heart is also autorhythmic, which means it doesn't need instruction from the brain to operate, which makes sense if you consider that the heart is functioning before the brain is. And it also has 60,000 sensory neurites of its own, which gives it its own complex nervous system, which some refer to as the heart-brain. And 60% of the perpetual heart-brain communication is ascendant, and what that means is that the heart does more of the communication to the brain than vice versa. So why am I telling you this? Well, I mentioned emotional neurowellness earlier, and its importance for stress management and also habitual behavioral awareness and change. And from a neuro-wellness perspective, recognizing our emotional triggers and our habits is super important. How to manage and regulate them even more so. When we look at some of the brain hazards later, it's very useful to consider the emotional triggers that can cause some hazardous habits, and how emotional self-regulation may be very helpful to learn as the first step in neuro-wellness generally, and especially when making nutritional neuro-wellness changes. So how do we self-regulate? Well, brain speed and rhythm is actually guided by heart activity. Hence, when the heart speeds up, when we're stressed, when we're anxious, when we're nervous, so too does the brain, which can then lead us to overthinking, to anxiety, panic, and to choices and behaviors that don't always serve us well. However, when the heart slows, so too does the brain, which very simply allows us to calm the mind and the body and restore our balance and give us access to clearer thinking and better decision making. So a very simple tip for emotional self-regulation is to breathe slowly and rhythmically at a timing which is comfortable for you. Some people enjoy and choose box or square breathing, which is where you breathe in for a few seconds, say 4 or 5, and you hold it for the same amount, and then you breathe out for the same amount and hold it for the same amount and breathe in, and you keep breathing equally, whether that's 4 seconds, 5 seconds, 6 seconds. It will vary depending on your own lung capacity and what is comfortable for you. Others prefer to breathe in for 4, 5, or 6 seconds and then breathe out for longer, maybe for 5, 6, 8, or even 10 or 12 seconds, again, depending on your own individual capacity. James Nestor has written a very good book, Breath, and I believe that some of you here tonight may have recently heard his excellent talk at the Barbara O'Neill event in Scotland. I can highly recommend his book if you don't have it already. But I would point out he's about to bring out a new version in January, so you might want to wait till then. So slow rhythmic breathing will slow the heart, which slows the brain, and that will regulate your autonomic nervous system and vagus nerve, and it allows you to emotionally self-regulate in the moment in real time. And all of the research that HeartMath does has been very valuable in this respect. And of course, they also have the biofeedback sensors and monitors, which enables you, some people really like that, and it enables them to see what they're doing in real time. So now let's take a specific look at the optimal nutrition approach that will support the functioning of these essential aspects of neurocognitive performance and well-being. Now, I'm going to give quite a lot of information on this slide. I thought about writing it all on the slide, but it was too much, which is why I've done a little PDF summary that I'm going to send you afterwards. So this is just very much an overview of the key neuronutrients. So remember I said just now that the brain can't store energy. So by necessity, a neuro-friendly diet will be a low glycemic index. So that means that there will be slow release, sustained, consistent energy balanced during the day. So by that we mean the nuts, the seeds, the pulses, the fish, the eggs, the lean meat, some whole grains, but things which are going to very much give you the slow release energy rather than the spike which comes with the sugar and carbohydrate based diet. So remember also that the brain is made of fat, 60% fat. So healthy fats are essential. Essential fatty acids are essential for protecting the myelin sheath around the neurons. And the myelin sheath, which is the fatty electrical insulation covering around the ends of the nerve cell, is crucial for rapid electrical transmission. And disruption or poor myelin insulation contributes to cognitive decline and conditions such as multiple sclerosis, which is actually characterized by myelin insulation, demyelination, and axonal damage. And so too is depression. So with the fats, you want to be thinking coconut oil, extra virgin olive oil, avocados, oily fish. And for those people who choose a vegetarian or vegan diet, flax seeds, chia seeds, pumpkin seeds, and walnuts and macadamias are also very high in fat. And it's my guess, and it's just a guess, although hopefully an educated one, is that there is definitely a causal link with dementia and cognitive decline and the low-fat diet that's been popular over the last 40 years or so. And it's also interesting to note that according to the Alzheimer's Society here in the UK, at least, 65% of people with dementia are women. Now, the generally accepted reason for this is that women live longer than men, so they have more lifespan to develop it. But a question that I have pondered is whether women are actually more likely to embrace a low-fat diet for the sake of weight management and appearance. I know my mother certainly took that approach. My dad never bothered and remains as sharp as a knife. But as I say, this is purely supposition and guesswork on my part. But we do know that obviously the brain is 60% fat, needs fat. And it has also long been known that a high-fat ketogenic based diet can be very helpful for neurological conditions such as epilepsy. And research is also demonstrating that it may be beneficial for other significant brain conditions such as MS. So the omega-3 EFAs found in fish oil are also known to have antiarrhythmic effects. So i.e. they are beneficial for heart rhythm and benefiting key elements of both of those major neuro-wellness organs, the brain and the heart. And I would just point out that the best source of essential fatty acids is fish oil. And the reason for this is because it's readily absorbable by the body. Now, other plant sources such as flaxseed oil or chai and the oils that come from the nuts and the seeds that we eat, they produce a plant-based alpha-linoleic acid, an ALA, which the body then needs to actually convert into the essential fatty acids to be properly utilized. So it can still get it, but it's a slightly more it's a more long-winded and a less efficient process for the body. But if you are allergic to fish, or if you just don't eat animal products at all, then obviously it's a really good option. And for those people that do take or for who fish is an option, and if you can manage it, I would say that straight fish oil is better than capsules, because often, unless you get a really good brand like the Metagenics Eskimo 3 range, they often have plasticizers in the soft gels. So you need to be very careful which brands you're using, and not just taking the cheapest one off the shelf. So the brain also needs protein. So the best source of complete protein, often called nature's multivitamin, is eggs. And I could do a whole presentation just on eggs. They have a significant amount of fat-soluble vitamins A, D, E, K, a wide range of the B vitamins, and just in one egg. So there are other complete proteins in lean meats and fish and poultry, dairy, soy, and if you are vegan, then you need a bean and grain combination, because on their own they're incomplete proteins. So to have them together, it accesses a complete protein. So B vitamins are necessary to produce brain chemicals, the neurotransmitters, to support myelin sheath receptors, and B vitamin deficiency has long been linked to depression, and that can take quite a long time to become apparent, and that's one of the longer term issues with vegetarianism and veganism. So greens are a really good source of folate, which is B9, but like so many of these nutritional benefits, you have to really know that there are disadvantages as well as advantages. So for example, greens have oxalic acid in them, which is actually a nutrient inhibitor. So when you eat it, if you eat raw kale or raw broccoli, can actually be counterproductive. Not only is it hard to digest, but you're not going to get the benefit of the B9 unless you steam it or boil it slightly. So just to be aware that oxalic acid and the oxalates can stop the absorption of the benefits, and in this case the folate and the B9. Vitamin C is another essential neuronutrient. It's water soluble, so it's excreted after a few hours, hence our daily requirement for it. And you can't take too much vitamin C, because if you did, you would just pass it in the urine. So from a brain perspective, it's required for myelin formation, and it is best to take a natural source as a synthetic ascorbic acid, which is often added to many products as a preservative, even to orange juice, is derived often from corn-grown black mold, the Aspergillus niger, and the vitamin C, it's a byproduct of the fermenting glucose process that they go through to produce the ascorbic acid. So, and sometimes the corn can be genetically modified and it can have deleterious effects on the body. So I would stick to obvious sources that have no dubious trail of creation, but come straight from nature, preferably organic. So whether that's citrus, kiwi, strawberries, peppers, and the less obvious sources. So Brussels sprouts, potatoes actually have about 30% of your daily vitamin C if you have it with the skin on. Tomatoes, 40%. And one of my favorite sources, elderberries, which are in abundance this year. So I've been making lots of elderberry oxymel. Zinc is another highly essential mineral. It's the most abundant trace mineral in the brain, and is required for serotonin, which is another brain chemical that modulates neural activity and regulates mood, and low levels linked to depression. And you'll find zinc in meat, game, fish, seafood, nuts, and seaweed. Iron is another crucial for the structure and function of the nervous system, and low levels of iron can be linked to cognitive and behavioral disorders, and that's a crucial one for our children. Lots of iron in organ meats, especially beef liver, oysters, mussels, sardines, and the vegetarian versions, lentils, soybeans, sesame seeds, pumpkin seeds, and a little bit of dark chocolate. Although note that too much caffeine can actually inhibit absorption of iron. So again, it's just knowing the balances to take. Copper. Now, we only need a small amount of copper, but it's required for brain-specific enzymes that control neurotransmitters such as dopamine. And it also has antioxidant properties, which is helpful against oxidative stress and free radicals. And deficiency can cause fatigue and weakness, frequent illness, brittle bones, joint pain, memory issues, cognitive decline, to name but a few. Plus, it can also has been linked to premature grey hair. So meat, soy, oysters, shiitake mushrooms, sesame, sunflower seeds, cashews, Brazil nuts, hazelnuts, and of course, copper drinking vessels, an Ayurvedic practice that's been used for hundreds of years, and maybe is linked to why so many Ayurvedic practitioners have wonderful, long, dark, black hair. Don't know. Anyway, magnesium. Magnesium is the fourth most abundant mineral in the human body, and it's essential for the entire human organism, for nerve and muscle function, heart rhythm, blood pressure regulation, bone health, energy production, to name but a few. But from a neuro perspective, it's essential for harmonizing nerve signaling at the synapses, and we need it, especially for people that maybe have low blood pressure or experience migraines. Pumpkin and chia seeds, almonds, cashews, spinach, peanuts, tofu, chickpeas, oily fish, avocado, bananas, and a little bit of sea salt. Now, I would make a point here about magnesium, because there are many types of magnesium, and if you take too much of the wrong one, it will cause diarrhea, and some of them really should be avoided, or certainly only taken in small amounts. Magnesium oxide, for example, is often used as a filler in some of the cheaper magnesium supplements, and it does have laxative effects. So if you're going to take a supplement rather than a food source, L-threonate is very useful because it crosses the blood-brain barrier and is the best for cognitive support, focus, and learning. Plus magnesium bisglycinate, which is the most bioavailable and is useful for calm, for for creating a calmer mind and for sleep. And magnesium citrate is helpful for healthy digestive system, and for support if you suffer from constipation. But I would just point out there is no natural food source of magnesium L-threonate, so it is only synthetically made, and therefore to make sure that you get a good brand which isn't filled full of magnesium oxide. So good brands are here in the UK, certainly Metagenics or Clive de Carle. His is very good. And a word about sea salt, because people are often say that if you take sea salt, then you have enough magnesium. It's actually very challenging to find accurate measurement of magnesium in sea salt, of the different types of magnesium in sea salt. And most sources will tell you that sea salt has approximately 70 to 80 different minerals. It's mostly sodium chloride, 85%. With some magnesium chloride or magnesium sulfate, which Epsom salts. So, and also a lot of the information that is out there is related to particular products or to selling the advantages of a particular product. So my approach is, if you are generally healthy, stick to food sources of magnesium. So as I said, the pumpkin and chia seeds, almonds, cashews, spinach, peanuts, tofu, chickpeas, oily fish, avocado, bananas, and a little bit of sea salt, high quality sea salt such as blackthorn here in Scotland, or Cornish sea salt is also another good one here in the UK, unless there is a therapeutic reason to supplement, and then do so with an advice from a nutritionist to ensure that your supplements are not bulked with the wrong thing. Calcium is another essential neuronutrient, important for the release of neurotransmitters, enabling the brain cells to talk to each other. And if deficient, your biochemistry is so clever that the brain will actually take calcium from your bones in order for the brain to function. So it's very necessary that we continue to increase and maintain our calcium intake. So collard greens, lamb's quarters, otherwise known as wild spinach, which grew bizarrely in abundance here in my garden this year. Bok choy, chia seeds actually have twice the amount of calcium than milk. Sardines with the bones, almonds, sesame seeds, dairy, soybeans, flax or linseeds, and dried figs. And just to say, as I said before, though calcium is in dark leafy greens, there is a lot of oxalic acid in greens that will inhibit calcium absorption, so it must be lightly cooked, either lightly boiled or steamed. L-theanine. L-theanine increases low levels of serotonin, which is a really important neurotransmitter for the central nervous system, and it helps to control your mood and sleep cycle. Dopamine and GABA, which is the abbreviation of gamma aminobutyric acid, which is a chief inhibitory neurotransmitter responsible for reducing neuronal excitability and overfiring. So L-theanine enhances learning, memory, it reduces anxiety and depression, and it can offset the negative effects of excess caffeine. And the chief sources are, in fact, green tea, also white tea, oolong, and some black tea. It's especially high in leaves grown in the shade. And I know there is some caffeine in green tea, but nevertheless, drinking sources of L-theanine will help to negate the effects of excess caffeine. Choline, another important neurotransmitter for brain development, especially fetal, and metabolism. And we do make a little, but not enough. So lack of choline has been found to lead to memory loss. It's an essential component of neuron membranes, and one of the best natural sources is eggs, but also beef or chicken liver, salmon, and dairy. Eggs are a particularly concentrated source, especially the yolk, but plant-based sources are soy, Brussels sprouts, broccoli, lentils, quinoa, potatoes with the skin, peanuts, and almonds. So There's a lot of information there, I know, but I will, as I said, I will be sending you the PDF, which summarizes all the best sources for where you can get all of those, which is a one-pager that you can hopefully put inside your cupboard door, just to remind you. And a discussion of neuronutrition would not be complete without discussing the microbiome and gut-brain health. It is essential, and the studies now are showing that a healthy gut equals a healthy brain. And there's a growing practice of psychobiotic nutrition, which is nourishing mental health with pre and probiotics. So by that we're talking fermented foods, bone broth, prebiotic fiber to feed the good bacteria, so it's not just probiotic but also prebiotic, and to reduce inflammation and support neurotransmitter production. And also an essential element for gut health is hydrochloric acid, and low hydrochloric acid is known as hypochlorhydria, and can significantly impact digestion and overall health. So hydrochloric acid is required to create the acid environment required to break down proteins, and too little can result in bloating, gas, indigestion, feeling full even when you haven't eaten very much, and can also result in putrefaction in the gut, because you literally don't have the necessary elements to process what is there, and that results in further gas, bloating, and IBS type symptoms. So sometimes IBS can be relatively relieved just by increasing hydrochloric acid. So how do we do that? Well, apple cider vinegar and fresh lemon in the morning, half an hour before a meal, although please use a glass straw to protect the enamel on your teeth. And using remedies like traditional Swedish bitters, for example. So bitter foods are an essential part of our diet, and that's why our tongue has the particular elements to identify bitter foods. And although we've become very used to sweet things, that the bitters are designed to get the digestive system working correctly. So adding some bitter herbs to your diet to sprinkle on top of your salads, so your rocket, even your dandelion, as long as you collect it perhaps from your garden rather than a roadside, and make sure that they are washed and organic and not treated with anything nasty. And fermented foods, sauerkraut, kimchi. Be careful with some of them though, because they may have had the fermented aspects added after creation rather than actually going through the whole fermented process, which I'm still not sure why they do that, but anyway. Likewise with kombucha and the shop bought varieties, they're not necessarily as good as they may be considered to be. So making your own is always the best way. And mindful eating is essential. Chewing food thoroughly means that the body's got to do less work, and also reducing water and liquid consumption with meals means that you're not diluting the body's essential hydrochloric acid. So as I say, you will receive all of that summary in a PDF and a neuronutrient checklist after this presentation, and hopefully you can therefore make some easy additions to your neuro-friendly diet.